June 4, 1942, 10:20 a.m. Pacific Time. North of Midway Atoll. The sea is a sheet of hammered steel. Sunlight scatters across the waves in blinding shards, flashing off signal lamps and binocular lenses. On the bridge of the Japanese flagship Akagi, boots strike the deck with clipped urgency. A runner salutes, breathless. The Admiral does not move. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands rigid beneath the awning, gloved hands folded behind his back. The wind lifts the hem of his coat. He watches the horizon with a gaze trained by decades of discipline, a man accustomed to command, to control, to outcomes that obey intention. Below him, on the flight deck, aircraft crews move with mechanical precision. Fuel hoses snake across planks darkened by oil. Ordnance teams wheel bombs toward waiting aircraft. Metal clanks. Voices snap. Engines cough awake in staggered bursts of thunder. The carrier breathes like a living machine. You can almost feel the vibration through the deck, a constant tremor underfoot, a pulse of steel and combustion. Hours earlier, Japanese aircraft had struck Midway. Reports suggested success. Hangars destroyed. Runways cratered. Resistance weakening. It was proceeding as planned. It was always supposed to proceed as planned. Nagumo's staff gathers nearby. Charts pinned under glass. Bearings marked in pencil. Air patrol patterns updated with swift, confident strokes. They speak in controlled tones, but there is energy beneath their restraint, the electricity of a fleet at the peak of its power. 4 carriers. Veteran crews. The best naval aviation force on Earth. Confidence, in war, is rarely loud. It is quiet, assured, methodical. A message arrives. An American contact. Possibly ships. Uncertain composition. The information is incomplete, ambiguous, and yet it introduces a ripple that spreads across the bridge like a pressure wave. Officers lean closer to the map. Eyes narrow. Calculations begin. Nagumo does not react outwardly, but he asks for confirmation. Calmly. Precisely. Reconnaissance reports are the pulse of naval warfare. They decide when steel moves and when steel dies. And this one is imperfect. Below deck, ordnance crews begin a dangerous, exhausting reversal. Aircraft armed for second strike on Midway are now to be rearmed for anti-ship attack. Bombs are rolled away. Torpedoes brought forward. Fuel lines reconnected. Decks crowded. Hangars congested. The fleet is in transition, and transition is vulnerability. You can imagine the smell. Aviation fuel thick in the air. Heated metal. Sweat trapped beneath uniforms. The taste of salt carried by the wind. Then another message arrives. Enemy ships confirmed. The words land with weight. Not panic, but gravity. Plans shift. Decisions tighten. The operational rhythm accelerates. Above the fleet, combat air patrol fighters slice through the sky, scanning for threats. The sun is high. Visibility is excellent. It feels like control. But control at sea is always temporary. At 9:18 a.m., radar operators detect incoming aircraft. Small groups. Scattered. Low altitude. American torpedo bombers. They arrive not as a coordinated hammer, but as a series of desperate thrusts. Slow. Exposed. Courage made visible against impossible odds. Japanese fighters dive to intercept. The sky becomes a violent geometry of motion. Spirals, bursts, streaks of tracer fire cutting white scars across blue sky. One by one, the attackers are torn apart. On the bridge, reports arrive in steady succession. Enemy aircraft destroyed. No hits. Minimal threat. Confidence reinforces itself. It always does, until it doesn't. Nagumo listens. Evaluates. Absorbs. Each report confirms what doctrine promised. The fleet remains dominant. Below, deck crews continue rearming operations. Aircraft crowd the hangars. Fuel lines remain connected. Bombs and torpedoes lie staged in lethal proximity. It is efficient. It is necessary. It is dangerous. The Admiral glances toward the sky again. Bright. Empty. Secure. Or so it seems. Time stretches in naval battle. Minutes become strategic eras. Decisions made in silence ripple outward into history. Then, at 10:20 a.m., something changes. A lookout points upward. At first, they are nearly invisible, small shapes high in the sun's glare. No warning. No formation detected earlier. No interceptors positioned above. Dive bombers. They appear like shadows detaching from the light itself. Sirens erupt across the carrier. Shouts cut through engine noise. Officers snap commands. Fighters scramble upward too late. Too far below. Too scattered. The first aircraft rolls inverted, nose plunging toward the deck. Gravity takes hold. Air screams across wings. You can almost feel the sudden drop in temperature, that instant when certainty evaporates. Bombs fall. One strikes near the forward elevator. A flash. A shockwave. Fire erupts upward, blooming into the sky with violent elegance. The deck convulses beneath impact. Another detonates among aircraft lined wingtip to wingtip. Fuel ignites instantly. Flames race across the deck faster than men can move. A third impact rips open steel and structure alike. The carrier is no longer a weapon. It is becoming a furnace. On the bridge, Nagumo grips the railing. Smoke pours upward in thick, choking columns. The orderly choreography of the fleet fractures into chaos. Fire crews run into infernos. Ammunition begins to cook off. Secondary explosions thunder through the hull. And still the attacks continue. Across the formation, other carriers are struck within minutes. Precision born not from luck, but timing, altitude, and a momentary gap in defense. A fleet that entered the morning in control now fights simply to survive. The Admiral watches through smoke and flame. His command, the speed count of an empire, is dissolving before his eyes. For a moment, sound disappears. Not literally, but in perception. Shock compresses awareness. Time slows. Details sharpen. Men leaping through fire. Aircraft rolling overboard. Decks collapsing inward. Signals lost in static. Confidence does not shatter instantly. It erodes. Quietly. Relentlessly. Like steel under heat. A staff officer approaches with damage reports. Voice steady, but strained. Casualty estimates unknown. Fires uncontrollable. Aircraft losses severe. Nagumo nods once. A morning's assumptions are already obsolete. The ocean, moments ago a stage of command, has become a field of consequences. And as the flames climb higher, a realization begins to form, not fully conscious yet, not spoken, but unavoidable. This battle is no longer unfolding according to plan. It is unfolding according to reality. And reality is merciless. The flagship burns. Signals falter. Command fragments. The balance of power, carefully constructed, fiercely defended, trembles on the edge of irreversible change. But the worst understanding has not yet arrived. Because what the Admiral does not yet fully grasp is that this is not merely a setback. It is a turning point. And the full weight of that truth is still descending from the sky. Flames do not roar at first. They whisper, thin, bright tongues licking across the flight deck, slipping beneath wings, crawling into open panels where fuel fumes linger. Then they find oxygen. Then they find ordnance. And then the carrier begins to burn like a living thing in pain. On the bridge, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo watches men disappear behind walls of black smoke that climb toward the morning sun. Signal flags hang limp, half obscured by ash. The wind, once crisp and clean, now carries a choking mix of burning fuel, hot metal, and scorch paint. It coats the throat. It stings the eyes. You can almost taste the battle turning. Damage reports arrive not as structured information, but as fragments. Forward elevator destroyed. Hangar deck inferno. Ammunition detonations increasing. Firefighting control lost. Each message is a subtraction. A staff officer bends over the plotting table, erasing and rewriting aircraft availability with shaking hands. Numbers shrink with every update. Squadrons that existed an hour ago are now abstractions, units reduced to smoke over the sea. Below, sailors run through corridors that are no longer corridors. Heat warps bulkheads. Paint bubbles. Steam bursts from ruptured pipes. Emergency crews drag hoses that spit water into furnaces too hot to quench. A carrier is designed to project power. But once its internal order collapses, it becomes a labyrinth of fire. Nagumo remains outwardly composed. He must command. In moments like this, is performance as much as decision. But behind the stillness, calculation accelerates. He knows the doctrine. Concentrated striking power. Initiative seized early. Enemy neutralized before counterattack. But now the enemy has struck first, decisively, unexpectedly, devastatingly. Across the formation, smoke columns mark where sister carriers burn. The fleet's center of gravity, its aviation strength, is vanishing in minutes. You can feel the shift in the atmosphere of command. Not panic. Something colder. Recognition. Another officer approaches, face streaked with soot. He bows, then speaks quickly, efficiently. The fires are spreading to armed aircraft stored in hangars. Fuel lines cannot be shut down everywhere. Secondary explosions are imminent. Nagumo listens without interruption. The Admiral's gaze moves across the horizon. The sea is vast, indifferent. American carriers remain unseen, but their presence is now undeniable. Invisible adversaries have dictated the tempo of battle. Moments earlier, the Japanese fleet held initiative. Now it reacts. And reaction, in naval warfare, is often fatal. A violent tremor runs through the ship. A deep internal detonation sends a column of flames surging upward through shattered decking. Debris rains across the water. Metal fragments hiss as they strike the sea. The bridge crew instinctively ducks. The Admiral does not. Somewhere below, aviation fuel has found ignition. The flagship is dying. Orders must be given. Not symbolic ones. Real ones. Decisions that accept loss as fact. Nagumo confers with his chief of staff in terse exchanges. The language is precise, formal, but beneath it lies a brutal question. Can this carrier still fight? The answer arrives in silence. No flight operations possible. No safe deck. No intact air group. A fleet without aircraft is a body without reach. Around 10:45 a.m., another report filters through. Reconnaissance confirms multiple American carriers operating to the northeast. The enemy is not retreating. The enemy is pressing. For a moment, you can sense the weight of decades pressing into a single mind. Training, doctrine, tradition, the belief in decisive battle that shaped an entire navy. Now that belief meets evidence. And evidence is burning on the water. Across the fleet, surviving ships maneuver sharply, weaving through smoke screens and debris fields. Destroyers race to rescue sailors thrown into the sea. Lifeboats cut through oil-slick waves where men cling to wreckage. The sky, moments ago blue and open, now holds drifting pillars of black that stain the horizon. On the bridge, an aide presents a headset. Communications with other carriers are fragmentary. Some signals end mid-transmission. Others arrive distorted by static and heat damage. Command cohesion, the invisible architecture of power, is fracturing. Nagumo removes his gloves slowly, not theatrically, simply because the heat has become unbearable. He studies the burning decks below. Aircraft once prepared for attack now detonate where they sit. Explosions ripple through the ship, like thunder trapped inside steel. You can almost feel the deck tilting, not dramatically, but perceptibly, as internal structures weaken. And still the Admiral watches. Because leaders in war often confront a moment when observation becomes understanding. Not analysis. Not speculation. Understanding. A staff officer whispers what no one wishes to say aloud. The operational objective, destruction of American carriers, is no longer achievable with available strength. The plan that began this morning no longer exists. At sea, plans die quickly. But empires do not accept that easily. Nagumo finally issues the order to transfer command. Preparations begin to abandon the flagship. The words are formal, controlled, but they carry the weight of irreversible admission. The spearhead of the Imperial Japanese Navy is no longer a weapon. It is a casualty. Rescue destroyers draw alongside, risking explosion and debris. Sailors descend ropes into churning water streaked with oil. Smoke reduces visibility to a suffocating haze. As the Admiral prepares to leave the bridge, he pauses once more. He looks not at the flames, but at the horizon beyond them. Somewhere out there, American carriers maneuver with growing confidence. Their aircraft will return. They will strike again. The initiative has shifted, and it will not easily return. This is the moment when battle transforms into history. Far above the Pacific, the wider meaning of what is happening begins to take shape. Not yet fully grasped. Not yet articulated. But forming. Because this is not merely damage. This is structural loss. This is momentum broken. This is the first visible fracture in a chain of victories that once seemed unstoppable. And though the Admiral cannot yet see the full map of consequences, he can feel its outline. By midday on June 4, 1942, the naval balance in the Pacific has begun to tilt, decisively, irreversibly, during what will be known as the Battle of Midway. But the realization is not complete. Not yet. Because one more blow, one final confirmation, is still approaching across the ocean's horizon. And when it arrives, doubt will give way to certainty. The destroyer's deck pitches beneath his feet as Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo steps away from the burning carrier. Heat rolls across the water in suffocating waves. Behind him, the once proud flagship is a towering column of flame, its structure collapsing inward like a dying star. He does not look back for long. War does not pause for mourning. The surviving ships of the striking force maneuver in widening arcs, their formations looser now, less symmetrical, like a blade that has chipped along its edge. Signal lamps flash through smoke. Radio channels crackle with partial transmissions. Aircraft that never launched are gone. Squadrons that once defined naval supremacy exist only as missing reports. The fleet is still afloat, but it is no longer whole. Around midday, the sky grows quiet. Too quiet. Moments earlier, anti-aircraft guns had thundered relentlessly, their recoil shaking decks and bones alike. Now there is only the sound of wind over water, the low churn of engines, and the distant roar of fire consuming what remains of the carriers. Silence in battle is rarely comfort. It is anticipation. A lookout calls out a bearing. High-altitude contacts. At first, they appear as faint glints against the sun, small, distant, almost unreal. Then shapes emerge. Tight formations. Purposeful descent. American dive bombers again. There is no confusion this time. No assumption of control. No belief that defense will hold easily. The fleet braces not with confidence, but with awareness. You can feel the difference. The emotional climate of the battle has changed. Gunners track targets with heightened urgency. Fighters climb to intercept. But the defensive geometry that once protected the carriers has been disrupted. Coordination is fractured. Response times lengthen by seconds that matter more than minutes ever could. The first bomb falls toward another carrier struggling to recover from earlier damage. It strikes with brutal precision. A plume of fire erupts upward, followed by a concussive shockwave that ripples across the sea surface. Another explosion. Then another. Each impact is confirmation. This is no isolated reversal. This is collapse of concentrated striking power. Through binoculars, Nagumo watches the attack unfold from the deck of the destroyer that now carries him. His expression remains controlled, but the stillness is no longer confidence. It is absorption, the mind accepting what instinct resisted. 4 carriers committed to battle. 4 carriers neutralized within hours. The scale is undeniable. Nearby officers exchange glances they cannot suppress. They are trained to maintain composure, but their posture has changed subtly, shoulders lower, movement slower, voices quieter. Command authority persists. But inevitability has entered the room. A signal officer relays updated fleet status. Aircraft losses catastrophic. Strike capability effectively eliminated. Enemy carriers operational. Each phrase lands with finality. Above the water, aircraft circle briefly before departing westward. The Americans do not linger. They do not need to. The decisive damage is done. Nagumo lowers his binoculars. For a moment, he stands without speaking, eyes fixed on the horizon, where smoke pillars rise like monuments marking the end of an era. In naval warfare, there is a difference between defeat and transformation. Defeat can be absorbed. Forces can regroup. Strategy can adjust. Transformation alters what is possible. And in that moment, standing amid drifting debris and burning wreckage, the Admiral understands that the war he entered this morning is not the war that will continue tomorrow. The Japanese fleet had sought to draw the American carriers into a decisive engagement, to destroy them, to secure dominance across the Pacific, to shape negotiations from a position of unquestioned strength. Instead, the opposite has occurred. The initiative has shifted across an invisible line that cannot be redrawn by courage alone. Far away, the Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, Isoroku Yamamoto, waits for reports that will arrive slowly, incompletely, and with mounting gravity. The grand design, the carefully orchestrated operation intended to extend strategic control, is unraveling not over months, but within a single morning. Back on the destroyer's deck, wind scatters ash across the surface of the sea. Oil burns in iridescent sheets. Lifeboats collect survivors whose uniforms are blackened beyond recognition. War has a sound when momentum shifts. It is not loud. It is the absence of expectation. Nagumo finally speaks to his staff. His voice is measured, almost quiet, the tone of a man acknowledging not chaos, but consequence. Orders are issued to consolidate remaining forces, to withdraw surviving ships, to preserve what strength remains. It is a rational decision, a necessary decision, but it is also admission. The decisive battle envisioned by doctrine has occurred, and it has not favored the empire that sought it. As the afternoon advances, the smoke columns drift eastward with the wind, stretching into long, dark banners across the sky. They are visible for miles. A signal not sent intentionally, but unmistakable. To American pilots returning to their carriers, it is proof of success. To the Japanese fleet, it is proof of change. You can almost sense the psychological weight pressing downward, not on one ship, not on one commander, but on an entire strategic vision forged over years of planning and belief. For Nagumo, the realization is now complete. This battle has not merely damaged a fleet. It has altered the trajectory of the Pacific War. And yet the implications stretch even further, beyond carriers, beyond aircraft, beyond this day of fire on open water. Because when naval supremacy shifts, everything connected to it begins to move. Supply lines, offensive reach, defensive posture, national confidence. The ocean itself changes sides. As the surviving ships turn westward, leaving behind the burning wreckage of what was once the most powerful carrier force in the world, a new and unsettling question emerges, not spoken aloud, but present in every silent glance across the deck. If victory is no longer inevitable, what comes next? Afternoon light breaks through scattered clouds west of the burning fleet. Hundreds of miles away, the deck of USS Enterprise vibrates with returning engines. One by one, American aircraft descend from altitude. Wings scarred, fuel gauges near empty, pilots scanning for the painted E that promises survival. Hooks catch arresting wires with violent force. Tires smoke. Engines wind down. Ground crews rush forward, counting aircraft as if counting breaths. They already know. Even before reports are compiled, even before intelligence officers compare reconnaissance photographs, the smell of burned oil on returning planes tells the story. Pilots climb from cockpits with eyes wide not from fear, but from disbelief. Targets engulfed. Multiple carriers hit. Secondary explosions visible from miles away. Success, in war, often arrives quietly. It settles into posture, into movement, into the way men speak when they no longer expect disaster to follow immediately behind them. On the bridge, command staff study incoming messages with careful restraint. Confirmation replaces hope. What began as a desperate interception has become a decisive strike. Aircraft handlers cleared decks for the next wave. Damage is assessed. Ammunition is counted. The machinery of naval warfare continues, but its rhythm is different now. Less urgent. More certain. Across the task force, similar scenes unfold aboard USS Yorktown, a ship that had only days earlier borne the scars of earlier battle. Repair crews move with renewed intensity. Pilots gather in tight circles, voices low, replaying the attack in fragments. Altitude, angle, flame, shock. For the American fleet, the morning's gamble has paid off beyond expectation. For the Japanese fleet, it has cost more than ships. Far to the west, Vice Admiral Nagumo's surviving vessels steam through a horizon stained dark by drifting smoke. The ocean between opposing forces becomes more than distance. It becomes a dividing line between two strategic futures. Naval warfare is not only steel and fire. It is perception, belief, momentum. And momentum now moves in a different direction. You can almost feel the widening gap, not measured in miles, but in initiative. One fleet advancing cautiously with renewed confidence. The other withdrawing with diminishing certainty. As evening approaches, the Pacific returns to an eerie calm. Waves erase debris. Smoke thins into streaks. The battlefield begins its quiet transformation into memory. But the consequences do not fade. On American ships, intelligence officers pieced together reconnaissance reports. Aircraft markings identified. Damage patterns analyzed. Timelines reconstructed. They begin to understand the scale of what has occurred. 4 enemy carriers neutralized. Veteran aircrews lost. Operational reach severely reduced. The implications ripple outward instantly, through command structures, through strategic planning rooms thousands of miles away, through leaders who will read these reports with stunned attention. Back among the withdrawing Japanese ships, the atmosphere remains disciplined but subdued. Damage control continues. Survivors are counted. The dead are acknowledged in silence. Signals to higher command are drafted with precision that cannot soften reality. A fleet that entered battle as the dominant force of the Pacific now measures strength in what remains rather than what exists. Night begins to descend. Stars emerge over the same ocean that hours earlier burned with violence. The contrast is almost unbearable. The sea does not remember, but those who crossed it today will never forget. On the destroyer carrying Nagumo, the Admiral stands alone near the rail. The wind is cooler now. The smell of fire lingers faintly, like an echo. He has commanded forces across vast waters. He has witnessed victories that reshaped maps. But this moment is different, because he is not observing a tactical setback. He is witnessing the redefinition of possibility. Behind him, officers discuss withdrawal routes, refueling calculations, and defensive postures. Necessary conversations. Practical decisions. Yet beneath them all lies a deeper awareness. The Pacific War has entered a new phase, and no doctrine prepared them for this version of reality. Somewhere far beyond the horizon, Midway Atoll remains a small, unremarkable cluster of land and coral, a place whose significance lies not in its size, but in what happened in the sky above it. A morning's battle has redrawn the invisible architecture of power across an ocean. And though guns are silent for now, the consequences are still unfolding, not in explosions, but in strategy, in morale, in the long trajectory of a war that will not end quickly. Because the realization that struck one admiral on a burning sea will soon reach capitals, commanders, and nations. And when it does, the world will understand what truly changed on June 4, 1942. Night of June 4, 1942. Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. A lamp burns over a wide table covered in charts of the Pacific. Red pins mark forward positions. Blue arcs show operational reach. The arrangement reflects a year of expansion, swift, confident, seemingly unstoppable. Then the signal arrives. Not dramatic, not urgent in tone, but heavy with emissions. Ships unaccounted for. Air groups missing. Communications incomplete. Officers read silently. No one speaks first. Information in wartime travels unevenly, but its meaning travels instantly. Reports from the fleet confirm catastrophic carrier losses. Veteran aviators, men forged through years of training, gone in hours. Operational initiative compromised. Strategic timetable disrupted beyond repair. The room does not erupt. It contracts. Shoulders tighten. Pens pause over paper. The war plan that once projected control across an ocean must now confront an unfamiliar reality. The enemy still possesses the power to decide outcomes. For months, momentum had flowed outward from Japan like a tide, from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, across Southeast Asia, into the vastness of the Pacific. Each success reinforced belief. Each victory strengthened doctrine. Now doctrine meets consequence. Across the Pacific, in Washington, D.C., confirmation arrives through a different channel. Fragmented intelligence reports gradually forming a coherent picture. Analysts compare reconnaissance data, pilot debriefs, and intercepted signals. Patterns emerge. The scale becomes undeniable. 4 enemy carriers destroyed or fatally damaged. Inside briefing rooms, the atmosphere is cautious but electric. Maps are adjusted. Strategic horizons expand. What had been defensive planning begins to incorporate possibility. Not certainty. Possibility. Because naval power is not merely ships afloat. It is tempo, the ability to strike, to choose where battle occurs, to dictate when pressure is applied. And that ability has shifted. Back at sea, Japanese ships continue westward through darkness. The night conceals damage but cannot conceal absence. Where once a concentrated striking force steamed in unified formation, now scattered vessels maintain distance, preserving what strength remains. On deck, sailors speak quietly. Many say nothing at all. War at sea fosters a particular kind of awareness, a recognition that power can vanish faster than it appears. Vice Admiral Nagumo stands near the bridge wing, eyes fixed on a horizon that offers no answers. The events of the day replay not as spectacle, but as sequence. Reconnaissance delay, deck congestion, dive bombers emerging from sunlit sky. Moments. Decisions. Consequences. You can almost sense the invisible thread connecting those minutes to something far larger than a single battle. Because Midway did not end the war. It did something more complex. It changed the direction in which the war would unfold. From this night forward, strategic planning across the Pacific must account for an adversary no longer on the defensive. Offensive operations will require greater caution. Risk calculations will change. Time, once an ally, will begin to favor the other side. At Tokyo, planners consider reinforcement schedules, shipbuilding timelines, pilot training capacity. Numbers replace assumptions. Replacement cannot match loss quickly enough. Experience cannot be manufactured. At sea, rescue operations continue under starlight. Survivors pulled from oil-slicked water carry stories that will travel far beyond the horizon. Stories of sudden attack, of fire sweeping across decks, of a morning when expectation dissolved into reality. History rarely announces its turning points in advance. They are recognized afterward, when patterns shift, when momentum reverses, when confidence gives way to calculation. June 4, 1942, will be remembered not only for what was destroyed, but for what was understood. The Pacific War has not ended. It has transformed. And as dawn approaches over an ocean that appears unchanged, leaders on both sides begin preparing for a future shaped by a single morning of fire, a future in which initiative, once seized, must now be defended. But the final measure of this transformation will not be written in reports or maps. It will be written in the battles that follow. And those battles will reveal just how far the tide has turned. Dawn, June 5, 1942. The Pacific looks unchanged. Low clouds drift across a pale sky. Waves move with indifferent rhythm. If you did not know what happened here, you would see only ocean, endless, calm, untouched. But beneath that calm lies absence. Where once the striking core of an empire's naval power moved with precision and unity, there is now open water and scattered wreckage slowly sinking beyond reach. The sea keeps no monuments. It absorbs them. On the withdrawing Japanese ships, the mood is not chaos. It is clarity. Damage reports finalized. Casualty lists prepared. Strategic silence maintained. Discipline holds. But belief has shifted. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands at the rail as morning light reveals the empty horizon ahead. For years, Japanese naval doctrine had centered on decisive battle, one overwhelming engagement to break the enemy's will. That battle had come, and it had chosen its own victor. You can almost feel the weight of what cannot be reversed. Not just the loss of ships, not just the loss of aircrews whose training required years, but the loss of initiative, that invisible force that determines who acts and who responds. Naval warfare is governed by logistics, production, training, and time. And time, after Midway, begins to favor a different side. Far across the ocean, American commanders review updated intelligence with growing certainty. The result is not triumphalism. It is recognition of opportunity, a narrow window through which strategy can move from defense toward sustained offense. The war will not end quickly, but its direction has changed. In Washington, planners begin recalculating force projection across the Pacific. Carrier deployment patterns adjust. Operational tempo increases. Shipyards accelerate construction already underway. Every decision reflects a single understanding. The balance has shifted and must now be exploited. Meanwhile, at Tokyo, naval leadership confronts the limits of replacement. New ships will take years. New aviators will require time that the war will not grant freely. Strategic expansion gives way to strategic preservation. The Pacific, once a stage of advance, becomes a line to defend. This is how turning points truly function, not as dramatic endings, but as beginnings of new constraints. At sea, survivors of the battle watch the horizon in silence. Some witnessed decks erupt into flame within seconds. Some saw aircraft vanish into smoke. Others never saw the enemy at all, only the consequences of unseen attack. Each carries a fragment of the same realization. Power can vanish in minutes. The ocean that morning did not simply host a battle. It redistributed momentum across half the world. Vice Admiral Nagumo turns away from the rail and walks back toward the bridge. His posture remains upright, composed, the bearing of command unchanged. But the strategic landscape around him has transformed irrevocably. The war that began with confidence now demands endurance. Midway was not the end of conflict. It was the end of inevitability. In the months and years that follow, campaigns across vast islands and waters will unfold differently because of this morning. Supply lines will stretch in new directions. Air superiority will be contested under new assumptions. Every engagement will carry the shadow of what was lost here. Historians will later mark this battle as the moment when expansion met limit, when momentum reversed, when the Pacific War's trajectory bent toward a different conclusion. But for those who stood on burning decks and smoke-filled bridges, the understanding came earlier, not in analysis, but in experience. They saw the tide turn, and once seen, it could never be unseen.